All right, let's check in on our top business story on a Monday morning. Jameson Burko joining us from BNN Bloomberg. I love these stories, if only for the shock to the rest of the country that the average price of a single dwelling in Toronto has gone up again.
But it's a great city, you know? It's worth it to live here.
Is it worth almost $1 million for a house?
Yeah.
Right?
How long is this segment so I can stretch out my, I don't know. But, you know, I love living here. Both of us have lived outside of Toronto, and we have to ask ourselves whether it's worth the crazy competition, which seems to be coming back into the market here, Anne-Marie, at an interesting time, just before the election, when housing affordability is a major voting issue for a large proportion of voters in Ontario. We're now seeing bidding wars come back in the market in a big way. That was one of the big conclusions I saw looking over the numbers for May home sales in Toronto, is the average selling price in almost all major home types, you're talking condos, semi-detached homes, detached homes, were above that of the average listing price.
$805,000.
Right, which is lower than it was in May of last year, so that's worth pointing out. But it's also the 5th month in a row that we've seen prices above where they were the month before. So, you know, like with all data, it's used your perspective, right? You can look at it and say, year over year, it's still lower. Sales are still lower than they were at the same time last year, but sales are climbing than they were over the last several months. The prices are climbing over the last several months, and there really wasn't that much of a pullback to begin with. I mean, there was certainly a slowdown when the province introduced all those affordability measures, but one could certainly, I think, struggle to make the point to say that housing in Toronto is much more affordable now than it was a year ago. Certainly less crazy runaway as it was a year ago.
I mean, you have a personal story with that. You were in the thick of it. You lost, what, 13 bidding wars before you found a house?
15.
15?
Yeah, it was.
Do you feel lucky now that the housing prices are going back up?
Well, actually, it's funny. You know, once you get in the market, you sort of ask yourself, why did I care so much about how prices are doing? Because it's not like I'm going to turn around and sell my house. Quite the opposite. I wanted to buy a house so that I wouldn't have to move again for at least, I don't know, now that I've said this out loud on television, I feel like there's some real estate agent out there who's going to ring me up and say, I have a deal for you, and then I'll have to get out of my house in the next month or so. We'll see.
All of this playing along, as you mentioned, interesting into a provincial election. Voting happens on the 7th, so we'll see.
You know, actually, there was a poll, very quickly I should mention, that was released today also showing more than 2/3 of Toronto area voters will determine their vote, at least in some small part, based on the party stance toward housing affordability. So whether or not the Liberal campaign worked with this plan, I think is going to be a big deciding factor for a lot of people.
It'll be fun come Friday morning. All right, thanks so much, Jameson.
My pleasure.